Welcome, everyone. My name is Carmel Stabley. I'm your VP of Community for the Labyrinth Society. Today, I have with me Maia Scott and Dr. Liz Phillips. We are here to present to you part two of our two-part series. Today, we're going to be talking about building accessibility and inclusion into the Labyrinth experience, programming from the ground up. So I would just like to tell you a little bit about what these videos are for. Well, we want to further encourage and inform Labyrinth facilitators, builders, teachers, and walkers about creating labyrinths and labyrinth events that are accessible to all. So with up-to-date information from Dr. Liz Phillips, an educator and facilitator, Maia Scott, we're going to share some firsthand knowledge with you. So Maia, would you just go ahead and wave to everybody and say hello?
Hi,
And
everyone.
Liz, go ahead and say hello to everybody.
Hi, everyone.
There you go. So in the first part of our series, we talked about AI, from AI to analog. So from very, new techniques that are being used to some tried and true everyday technologies that the blind impaired community uses. Today, we just want to give you some tips and tools for building accessibility and inclusion into your Labyrinth programs. But before we jump in, I want to tell you just a little bit more about our guests today. So Maia Scott is an interdisciplinary artist. She's an arts director and an activist who approaches life through the lens of curiosity, compassion, and creativity. She teaches accessible art, theater, and movement with City College of San Francisco. She offers workshops throughout the Bay Area. She works as a collaborative artist with local museums and consults on audio description for Gravity Access. So Maia is not only a longtime member of the Labyrinth Society, she's also a certified Labyrinth facilitator. And she has a lovely guide dog by the name of Gleam, who walks around labyrinths with her everywhere. Now, Dr. Liz Phillips is the founder of Access Braille Consulting, ABC, she calls it, a company dedicated to making cultural and educational spaces accessible for the blind and low vision individuals. She established it in 2022. ABC focuses on providing expert solutions in Braille production, accessible programming, and consultation for nonprofit organizations, for museums, and for libraries. Liz has a PhD from the University of Arizona in philosophy and an undergrad degree from Stanford University. In addition to her Braille business, Liz works at the Talking Books and Braille Center at San Francisco Public Library. Beyond her public life, Liz is a creative spirit, a spiritual seeker, deeply connected to nature and the labyrinth. So thank you, ladies, for being here with us today. Let's dive in to building accessibility and inclusion into the Labyrinth experience from the ground up. So, ladies, accessibility is most effective when the project begins with a universal design. So, from written materials to website access to etiquette and offering labyrinth walk options, there are many details to consider to expand access. I have a few questions that I'd like for us to discuss today. And please, either one of you, as you feel led, just jump in and add to the discussion. But the first one I'm going to ask Maia Scott to chime in on. Maia, what's the difference between an accessible walk and a fully inclusive walk for the sight impaired?
There's a wonderful saying that is really moving to me and I think defines this beautifully, said by activist Verna Myers. And she says, an accessible accessibility is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. So think about the idea of going to a labyrinth walk as a person with a disability, or even as someone who speaks a different language. And the person comes up and says, "Welcome, come over here and sit down. I have something that you can use while the rest of us do our thing in the middle." Um, Maybe that's that finger labyrinth that is your accessibility tool. It's great. Glad you have it. But it definitely puts somebody to the side. Same thing with like, well, we have our basics in Spanish, and we hope you enjoy the presentation. Maybe someone can tell you about it later who speaks Spanish. So just thinking about accessibility and inclusion as thinking from the ground up, if possible. I know a lot of us already have programs and services and spaces initiated and going strong. So we'll talk more about ways that we can adapt that and whatnot. Meanwhile, look at universal design and the ability to make something that is useful for everybody, not just the one blind person or wheelchair user or different, someone who speaks a different language or whatnot.
Thank
And
you,
I just
Maia.
wanted to chime in really quickly and say that when you make labyrinth spaces accessible for people with disabilities, including people who are blind or low vision, you're making them more accessible for everybody. So, think about the um, tactile bumps on a ramp. Those help not just people who are blind or low vision cross the street, but they help people in wheelchairs, they help people with strollers, with children. So when you think about universal design and you're starting to create a labyrinth program or a new labyrinth build, um, making sure that accessibility is built in from the very start will not only make your labyrinth inclusive, but will also improve the experience for everyone who walks that labyrinth in the future.
There you have it. There you have it. Yes. You know what? We don't want to make wallflowers out of anyone. So I don't know about you, but I want to get up and dance. So thank
Me
you for
too.
that. Thank you for that inspiration, ladies. Okay. So I'm a facilitator. What kind of questions might I ask you, being a blind person or sight impaired, that might welcome you, that might make you feel more included? So, talk to me about how to converse.
I feel that not everyone has met a blind person before, and that's perfectly understandable. Um, Talking for the first time with somebody who's blind or low vision is a little like talking to someone from a different culture, and it's perfectly fine to ask. So, coming up to somebody and saying, how can I assist you today? Or is there anything that you need? Um, or would you like me to describe the space for you? Um, those are all things that are really helpful for me as somebody who's blind or low vision. And they're really open-ended and they help me feel welcome without feeling like I'm being singled out.
And Maya, do you have anything to add to that?
Liz pretty much covered my favorite questions. I like when people don't assume I need help and offer options. I also really appreciate when a lot of people think that touch is important to us, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we want to be touched. It means we want to touch things. So a lot of times people want to handle us and draw us in. Come over here. Let me show you this thing. So asking about just physical touch is really important. I feel in that starting conversation and setting of parameters. Another thing that's really interesting too is I get a lot of people who ask, well, how much can you see? And I understand that it's people trying to understand how they can help, but just asking how and if they can help will do the trick just fine.
Yeah, because people who are blind or low vision, it's a continuum, right? So not everybody is totally blind. People can see differently, but that might be considered a personal question. For some people, asking how you got blind is a very personal question. So focusing more on how you could assist in the moment um, is really great. And just making sure that, if you're uncertain, if you feel scared or unsure, just asking questions is the best antidote and response to uncertainty, and you'll start a conversation and it will put everyone at ease.
Let me ask you a simple question, ladies. I often, when I'm greeting someone, I will put out my right arm and I will shake their hand. Now, is that something that you, as a blind person or sight impaired, welcome as well? And
yeah.
Yes, how would I go about that? Would I just touch your hand? And could you tell in my tone of my voice that I'm reaching out to shake your hand? How does that work?
When I'm with blind people, I just say, I have my hand out. Do you shake hands? And either they'll say no or they'll reach out and we'll find each other.
Yeah, so often when I go up to somebody, I hold out my hand um, as a way to initiate a handshake, and then ask, do you shake hands? Because some people nowadays don't.
Yeah.
And if a sighted person sees my hand out, then they know it's okay to come up and shake my hand.
Yeah.
So I could very easily say, I would like to shake your hand. And that would be a prompt that you put your hand out and then we connect. So very good. Thank you. That was simple little tip there. So let's keep moving on into disability etiquette. Tell us a little bit more about that. We talked about guide dogs and human guides. What is a good guide? The proper way to give instructions or directions. Can you speak into that, ladies? Liz, I'll start with you quick.
Thank you. So I wanted to, before we talk about sighted guide or human guide, I wanted to give a few other tips for interacting with other blind and low vision people. The first one is to introduce yourself by name. So, I might come up to you and say, hi, I'm Liz. I'm a Labyrinth facilitator here at this event, before asking my question. And that way, that just helps level the playing field for people who are blind or low vision. If you meet the person later on in the event, repeating your name, hi, it's Liz, we met earlier, just makes it a lot easier for a person to feel like they're part of the group and they know who you are. Asking and not making assumptions is also very important. We already talked about that earlier. So, and then what Maia said about making sure that when you do come up to a blind person and it looks like that person might need assistance, just asking and not grabbing or holding on to the person is really important, because consent is a really crucial thing for everyone, whether you're blind or sighted. We all want touch to be consensual. So, when you grab someone and try to lean them somewhere, it can be disorienting to the person. And it also could actually hurt the other person. The person might trip on something. So it's a lot safer and better for them to not do that. And then, the other thing is, like, sometimes blind people are mistakenly thought to also not be able to hear well. Some blind people have multiple disabilities, but not all blind people are also deaf. So one of the things that can happen is people will shout at other blind people. That's really not necessary. Additionally, most blind people don't have balance issues. Some might, but many don't. And so there's no need to worry that just because somebody is blind, they will imminently fall. I've had experiences where people have come up behind me in my personal space with their arms out around me, and it turned out they thought I was just going to fall over instantly. That's not really necessary. Um, and yeah, so those are all really important things to keep in mind. Talking to the blind person um, instead of their sighted friend or relative who might come with them to the walk, also very important.
Right. Make contact. So, Maya, is there anything that you want to add? Maybe you can talk about human guide and maybe good ways and bad ways to giving instructions and directions.
Love it. Yes. So, human guide, some people might also hear it called sighted guide. They've recently kind of changed it to human guide because a lot of us blind people will help each other out. So, we're not sighted and we're guiding. So, human guide is a very simple and useful protocol for offering wayfinding assistance to somebody who might need it. And uh, you're invited to go up to the person, well, of course, and ask, can I offer you, um, you know, uh, an arm going over to the labyrinth, or would you like assistance finding a seat or whatnot? So, in doing so, you can go up to them on the side where they're not holding their dog or their cane, and stand just slightly in front of them, to the side, and say, I'm on your left. If you'd like to hold my elbow, we can get started. So the blind person will likely reach up and put their hand on your elbow. You can leave your arm just loose and relaxed. You don't have to pull them in and have the death grip. They're not going to fall away from you and fly off into eternity. And similarly, if they death grip on you, just shake your arm out and say, "Loosen up, you're okay. I've got you." And what's going to happen is when you start walking, you'll be slightly ahead of the blind person as their elbow is bent. So they'll be a couple steps behind you. And you can stop at steps and say, "We have 3 steps going down or 3 steps going up." You can pull your arm behind you a little bit. If it's a narrow space, we're going to uh, walk between some chairs right now. Describe that as you go, and just kind of stay in communication. If you feel them pulling on you a little bit back, you might slow down. If they're kind of pushing on you, you can speed up. You can ask, are we at a good pace? If you're going a ways.
So, Maya, let me ask you,
Yeah,
when you talk about holding their elbow, is it usually better to hold the elbow than to hold hands?
yeah. The elbow is going to keep you closer. It also gives the blind person the autonomy to let go if they need to. So, for example, someone might be guiding me, and I have Gleam on my left, and she um, is like looking off to the left, and I need to manage her for a minute. So I can let go of you, and I don't have to, ask permission. I can say, "I'm stopping, take care of my dog, put my hand back."
So the same thing when someone might be guiding you through a labyrinth, they would walk slightly ahead of you. You would be holding. Is it always the right side arm, or is it either or?
It's either or.
Okay.
I usually go to the side that does not have the person, that does not have the cane or the dog. Or in many cases, when I have my dog with me, uh, I go to their left side because my dog is on my left. And that's another thing too, as far as just one more thing about the hand holding. especially nowadays, cleanliness and are a worry. So
Right.
touching elbows is also a nice way to have people feel a little bit safe,
Mm-hmm.
in case, people have done nose rubbing or we don't know what's going on.
So then again, I'm offering you my elbow on
Hmm.
whatever side makes sense. I'm walking slightly ahead of you and
Hmm.
I am describing what's going on. Oh, we're walking, past a bunch of chairs. Oh, over to your left, there's a beautiful garden. We'll visit that later, that type of thing. Correct?
That that's good. It might also just be, conversation. Like maybe the person's been there before, and you're just saying like, "Hey, how's it going?" Last time we got together, we talked about this project you're doing. Did you complete it?
Right.
It's really going to vary depending on who
Keep it
you're
real.
walking
Keep
with.
it real is what you're saying. I love that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let's continue on this image description. My other question is to elaborate a little bit more on, how to do it properly. Yeah, and when is it called for? Like, I mean, we don't have to be jabbering the whole time to you. So when is it to, when should we engage the image description?
Well, one thing I wanted to jump in and say, which is um, a little bit tangential to your question, and I'll answer it directly, but it's relevant here, is feel free to use words like see or look.
Yes.
Um, so this is relates to your question about description. It's okay to say something like, you know, um, if you look to your right, you can see um, trees in the distance. People say things like, I watched TV last night and that kind of thing. So that language is perfectly fine when you're describing or just talking to somebody who's blind. So there's no need to change your language when you're making
Oh,
descriptions. Um, so having said that, yeah, I think one of the main important parts of a good description will be first and foremost on your website before you even get to a Labyrinth event. So making sure that you have really good descriptions of the kind of labyrinth that you're going to be walking at the event, whether it's a finger labyrinth or um, a physical labyrinth, a description of the kind of materials you're using or the kind of labyrinth that you're going to be walking. That all gives somebody an idea of what they're going to expect before they even get there. And that can be really, really helpful and help the person feel included. Um, for me, as someone who's totally blind, just going sighted guide to a chair or something like that, I don't usually need a lot of description. For me, when I'm being led to a chair, if somebody puts the totally blind person's hand on the back of the chair,
Yeah.
that allows the person to be able to walk around the chair and seat themselves independently. So that's really helpful. But in terms of walking the labyrinth or getting to the labyrinth, you could ask the person, would you like some description of your surroundings as we walk to the labyrinth? Or would you like a description of the layout of the labyrinth before we get started? And in that case, being able to describe the kind of labyrinth, whether it's painted on the floor or if it's made out of different materials, is really helpful in real time. Um, and yeah, just um, some people want more description than others. So just having a communication of, let me know if, I've explained enough to you or if you have any further questions. Having a dialogue is really helpful, and it also keeps things casual and just and authentic and flowing. And, you know, blind people are first and foremost people. So keep that in mind when you're interacting. You're just interacting with another person who has a different way of doing things and seeing the world.
oh, thank you so much for that, Liz. We appreciate that. So, Maya, I'm going to turn this question to you. What are some of the features of an inclusive and accessible labyrinth build? I know you've been on a lot of labyrinths, so tell us.
Okay, most of the, not all, because I've been to some temporaries that have been very inclusive. One thing to think about accessibility is um, it can be messy, and you're probably not going to make everybody happy all the time. Um, so, as you think about accessibility and inclusion, sometimes it helps to just start thinking about one person as you envision your next great, wonderful, accessible, and inclusive thing happening with your Labyrinth program. So, just as far as accessible and inclusive builds, some of the most amazing ones I've been on include the Earl Baum Center Labyrinth in Santa Rosa. I've also not been, but there's one in Florida at a university that feels really good. There's one that I have to confess I'm blanking on her name right now. There's a woman who did a solar labyrinth that has a beautiful orb in the middle. So the thing that a lot of these have in common are they have wide enough paths that somebody who's using a wheelchair or walker can go on, and that is in this case if the uh, labyrinth itself is tactile or has fields or walls that are raised. So with your painted ones, it doesn't matter how wide they are because heaven knows my butt doesn't fit on some of those 17-inch paths. So just keeping that in mind. They also often have a smooth surface that is going to be safe and prevent tripping hazards. And this is like the ultimate, like if you built a completely accessible, inclusive labyrinth.
So then
There
if
can
someone was going to try to retrofit, a labyrinth that they have built already, and they want to try to make it more accessible for a specific walk that they're doing, what types of things could they add to their build that would help for that occasion?
you can do raised posts as markers to find the entrance and the center when you know you're at the center. And you can increase or decrease the lighting by using battery candles instead of live flame or solar lights, depending on how low or high light you would like to have. Something else to consider that sometimes the retrofitting isn't going to be about the labyrinth ground itself, but maybe the implementation of a program. I remember years ago, the idea of a labyrinth walk was it's autonomous, but why not have pairs walk and have options for um, exploration of interdependence and community building as a tool to invite people to walk together and support each other on the path, which would make it possible for someone with low or no vision to have a good eyes-free experience.
Yeah, Maya, I
To
wanted to jump in really quickly if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Just that I have done several labyrinth walks as a totally blind person and have done exactly what you're talking about, where I have walked directly behind a sighted person through the labyrinth, and it was an incredibly spiritual experience. I didn't need to walk it alone, and maybe having a program where everyone can do that if they want to and have that experience could make it inclusive and accessible. And I wanted to add about your tea light comment that several labyrinths I've walked were lined by candles, and um, it was a relief to me that they were tea light candles. Um, I'm very careful and, don't have issues with balance, but if anybody did, falling into an open flame could be dangerous. And as a blind person, it would be easy to accidentally kick a candle without knowing where it is. And I wouldn't want to knock over something and start burning down the labyrinth. So
right. So battery operated, yes, yeah.
battery operated is really helpful. And a lot of some programs use music, and making sure that um, the music is incorporated in a way that maybe is on a single side of the labyrinth, or so that maybe people won't get disoriented listening to lots of different kinds of musical sounds while walking the labyrinth could be really helpful too.
Yeah, it's interesting. So one other thing before we start to wrap up, what about the rope guides? We had talked about rope guides, and then I think we mentioned even you could put, if you wanted something tactile, you could line a labyrinth with a rope too, if like it was a flat surface labyrinth. So tell me about them and why are they handy? How do they help?
Ropes. I heard of somebody who did a labyrinth with ropes, and then one. I think someone from Canada did one with PVC rails. In those cases, you raise the fields or the walls quite a bit and have to do wider paths. So it's not something that you could just do to augment your existing labyrinth.
Mhm.
It's another way to walk, and it's great. And as far as putting the rope on the ground and covering it in tape, that's a great way to make a temporary labyrinth that is tactile and can be followed, using your feet barefoot. Uh, Canes may or may not catch it, depending on how precise the user is. I personally have a nylon actually labyrinth that has rope under webbing so that it can be walked eyes free.
And I also wanted to talk a little bit about finger labyrinths as well, because they're really important to also make accessible. In the previous video, we spoke about wiki sticks, which are string that are dipped in wax. There's also pipe cleaners. There's the accessible blackboards that you and other silicone surfaces where you can raise a finger labyrinth or even a tracing wheel um, on a silicone board. Um, that's a little more complicated because with the tracing wheel, you have to do your draw it backwards and then flip it over. But some of these other methods, you don't have to do that. But there are things that you can do to make a three-dimensional, you know, tactile finger labyrinth. Um, and, being able to have that available to everyone would be fantastic. There's different colored pipe cleaners and wiki sticks, for example, or lining it with tape. I also have personally a really beautiful ceramic labyrinth that I can trace by hand. So you could even do a program where you create clay finger labyrinths with people. There's all kinds of mediums that you can use to
Yeah,
make things more
finger
tactile.
labyrinths are fun. I mean, I own a few myself, and I always hope to have some with me on any walk that I facilitate. But it's not the only thing that you offer to anyone who's impaired.
No.
Like you said, we want to get them dancing. So before
Oh,
we
Carmel, really quickly,
go ahead.
I also have a bag of finger labyrinths of made with needle felting, paper mache. There's metal etching, transparencies that have been embossed. Like there's so many ways that you can make finger labyrinths, and it's a great tool to do with like a scouting group or a volunteer group with your organization. And the way you make finger labyrinths an inclusive part of your walk is you have a bunch of them. You have a table where anybody and everybody can choose to not be on the big one and walk a little one and sit in the
Right.
corner and be quiet.
Have a
Mhm.
smorgasbord of before and
Yes.
after, in between, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I love that idea. So what I'd like to do before we wrap up is to let our viewers know that we will have a resource page that will accompany this recording that will have places you can turn to in order to sort of explore this information on your own. Maia and Liz have graciously invited you to call them or email them if you have any specific questions. They are experts in their field. They have the know-how. They know where to go, for resources, and they have the experience. So before we wrap up today's session on building accessibility and inclusion into Labyrinth experiences, ladies, do you have any closing thoughts or one last tip that you definitely want to leave before we close today? Maia, I'm going to ask you first. Any closing thoughts?
Oh, that's a tough one. There's still so much to explore. I just can't emphasize enough that just what Liz said about thinking with an universal design, accessible and inclusive mindset is going to benefit everybody who enters your space and enjoys your programs. We have a lot of people who are aging, who don't identify as having a disability. So making your inclusive programs not necessarily saying and for the disability community, so that everybody can feel safe and comfortable partaking of your offerings in any way they choose to based on their own body wisdom and lived experience.
Oh, and Liz.
Yeah, I want to echo what Maya just said, and just add that, as we said earlier, blind people are people first, and going out into the community, talking with us, making us a part of the conversation. Nothing about us without us, and we want to participate. I've gotten so much out of the Labyrinth experiences that I have had, and making sure that you have multiple ways that people can experience your Labyrinth, um, whenever you have an event or a program. Um, and just remember some of the etiquette that we talked about, talk to the person with a visual impairment directly, ask, don't assume, um, introduce yourself by name, and, realize that um, that we are part of your spiritual community and part of the wide community of people that you reach out to, and we want to participate, and we're really excited to see what you do with this information and building and rebuilding inclusive spaces. And I hope that you take all of this information and go out there and make um, labyrinths that everyone, regardless of ability, can enjoy and participate in.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Liz. Did you want to add anything, Maia? I see your hand up.
One last thought. Just thinking about 1 in 4 people in our world, according to the census, I believe. I hope this is true news. I've heard it in a number of places. 1 in 4 people in our world identify as having a disability. Plus, we have our baby boomers who are aging at this point. So think about 1/4 of your community and how many people you are going to serve by working from a inclusive and accessible mindset as you develop your spaces and programs.
Well, thank you so much, Maia. Let's just say one more time, building accessible Labyrinth experiences begins with a universal design mindset. Thank you all for being with us today. Until I see you again, I'm Carmel Stabley. I'm your VP of Community for the Labyrinth Society. Thank you all, and good night.